Before I start with today's topics, I would like to know if anybody has got any question regarding the last day's session. Last day's session was on selection and managing the trainers, selection and development of trainers and managing trainers. If anybody has got any question, you're welcome to ask. Otherwise, we'll start. Go ahead with our today's topics. I think nobody has got any questions, so I'll proceed further. Today's topic is on engaging in outsourcing support services. Engaging outsourcing support services. As you understand that every organization, whenever they conduct their training programs, it requires certain infrastructure, it requires the competent trainers, it requires experienced people who are knowledgeable about the particular subject in which the training is going to be conducted. But at times, what happens, many of the organizations, they may not have some of these resources with them. Uh, so they may not have the necessary infrastructure, necessary training infrastructure, the equipment or the hall, or even sometimes the expertise and expert trainers, knowledge about the particular subject. And in such situations, it becomes necessary that the organization may engage the outsourcing, or they may outsource the support services from other organizations who are involved in such kind of things, or those who are having those kind of infrastructure available with them. So if that is the thing, then we need to understand that when and at what circumstances, in which situations such kind of outsourcing activities need to be done, in what are the areas in which we can do the outsourcing services, take the benefit of outsourcing services. Also, what are the various precautions or the various guidelines which you should follow while getting those kinds of, or making that those kind of outsourcing from the outsider service agencies. So we need to understand all these things so that it can help us in two ways. One is the cost is very important aspect, and sometimes it may be very costly to take an outside services from outsourcing agencies. So you have to see that whether it is the cost is justified and it goes according to the budget of the organization. Number one. Number two, whether the people whom are taking these outsourcing services from, whether they are competent enough to deliver such kind of thing what you're expecting from them. Number three, yes, how do you know, how do you assess that the people whom we are engaging are really competent enough in the area in which we are asking for their services? So all these things need to be assessed before hiring or outsourcing the support services, so that ultimately it's going to benefit our training purpose, our training goal, as well as it becomes cost effective, and it also really give the necessary desired transfer of training to the trainees. So, what are the things that we need to see that we will be seeing? So, first of all, we'll see that what are the outsourcing strategies in the sense that, mm, yes, when and at what circumstances we should start thinking that this is the right time, then we should outsource, and that's going to give us a benefit. So, with that, I will start sharing my presentation with you. Let us see. Well, what is not going down? Yeah, engaging and outsourcing support services. Outsourcing strategy. What should be the outsourcing strategy? Number one, that outsourcing strategy is used for outside training vendors. I mean, if there are outside training vendors who are conducting various kinds of training, now when you talk about the training, uh, so it's applicable for them, right? At times, almost all training activities are outsourced. Yes, it depends upon the organization whether they at all have any infrastructure or they at all have any training resource or the trainers available with them. Depending upon that, it may at times may happen that almost all the training activities are outsourced because they are lacking in that. That's quite possible. That may happen. Full commitment involves conducting all aspects of training. I mean, it's not that since you're outsourcing from somebody from somewhere outside, it does not mean that the organization who are outsourcing such things, they are they don't require to have any responsibility. No, they need to have full commitment towards that because they will simply outsource certain things, but rest of the things have to be done by them. So this is one thing: the commitment from the side of the organization and the outsource agency, that they must also have the full commitment towards conducting the all aspects of training depending upon what kind of facilities we are going to outsource from them. That has to be defined very precisely depending upon their competence and the contracted things. That commitment has to be taken from them. Number four, it must start with training needs analysis through evaluation. Yes, whether we're outsourcing or not, the training need analysis will remain the same. Only thing is that some part of the training activity will be outsourced from outside, but it has to pass through all the stages of training process, that is the training needs analysis, and then ultimately training need analysis, designing, yes, implementation of training, and then evaluation, and everything has to be done accordingly as is done otherwise. The outsourcing may be done for using the infrastructure of the training firm. So, as I told you earlier, that certain organizations they may not have the necessary infrastructure with them to conduct the training program, and in such situations, they may go in for outsourcing some of the training firms who are having their own infrastructure. So, you can only hire the infrastructure. Maybe that you may not require any trainer or any trainer facility. So you can only have the infrastructure from them. That's quite possible. That will depend upon the organization and their need. Using expertise of the consultant firm. The other part is that apart from the infrastructure or only the expertise of the consultant firm, those who have got expert trainers in the organization, their organization, or the consultants available with them on the particular subject, quantitatively and qualitatively, one can outsource those things from them. So there may be two things which can be outsourced, as I told you earlier also. Either the infrastructure for the training firm, infrastructure in the sense means the training hall, the training equipments, and all other things which are involved for conducting the training program. And the secondly, it may be the hiring the expertise of the consultant, means hiring the trainers or the expert people who are competent enough in a particular area of in any particular area of the subject. So that is what should be the outsourcing strategy. Only in such situation one has to outsource. And as an additional point, I must tell you, outsourcing shall be done only when the organization thinks that there is something which they are lacking in. Either they are lacking in the infrastructure, or they may not have the necessary trainer. The third thing quite possibly may be that even though may have got the infrastructure, or sometimes they may have the trainers, but maybe at a time sometimes the need for trainer, the volume of the training programs may be sometimes very high depending upon the necessity of the organization. So at a time when you have to train many people, If there is a requirement, certain requirement of training uh, thousands of people, and then in that case, apart from what they can do from the organization, they can partially they may get make outsourcing from the other agencies to meet up with the demands uh, of the training and need at that particular point of time. Well, now let us see the next point, that what is the HRD unit's role while outsourcing the outside agencies. What is the role of the HRD? The Human Resource Development Department has to do these things as they are doing earlier also, even though whether they outsource or not, they have to define the training needs. That's always there, that's needed, whether the things are being done internally or whether they're outsourcing to the outside agency is immaterial. They have to define the training needs. They have to identify the trainees for which the training is going to be conducted. Rather, as per the needs of the training will be conducted. So you have to identify the trainees who are the target group of the training. They have to identify the training program, that what kind of training program is to be conducted for that particular target group, depending upon the training need. And then when this is identified, the program is identified, the need is identified, the train is identified, the program is identified, then comes the necessity of uh, seeing that whether the resources available with us is enough to conduct that program. So there is a need for selecting the training suppliers. So we will first identify what are the areas in which we are really lacking, whether it is in infrastructure or it is in the competence of the trainers or the magnitude of the trainers, quantity of trainers we are lacking in. Then we may have to see, the organization may have to see that how that we have to outsource, but then we have to how we can choose and select the that suppliers from which you can take such kind of facility. So selecting the training suppliers becomes the next important role. And then once this is done, the trainers, the outside suppliers are selected, then definitely there is a need for managing the suppliers, because the organization has to keep the HRD unit may have to give a continuous contact and communication with those suppliers, so that with the very purpose of effectively conducting the training program, right? With which supports their goal of conducting the training program, the purpose for which they are going to conduct the training program. So the first thing is defining the training needs. They have to do it. They have to identify the trainees. They have to identify the training programs. They have to then they have to see where they're lacking, which resources are required, and accordingly they have to select the training suppliers or the infrastructure suppliers, and then they have to manage this. They have to keep in contact with those suppliers so that every training process can be managed effectively, keeping in view their goal of from this training particular training program. Now, let us will see that yes, if this is so, we have to select the training suppliers. Then who are the possible training suppliers or the vendors in the market? Well, the training suppliers are, it may be a training firm. A firm, a training firm may be of two kinds again. There are some training firms, mostly the training firms are there, providing with the trainers. They're giving that necessary knowledge, or the experienced people, supply the experienced people who can talk about and give a lecture on the particular subject for training the people. It may also happen that training firm has got their not only their resource of trainers, they may also have the training infrastructure available with them. So there may be training firms who are exclusively dealing with the training activities. There may be individual consultants. Consultants are generally they are experienced in some particular area of knowledge. So there may be at times it happens there is some specific knowledge which is rarely available, and every organization may not have that kind of specialized knowledge with within their organization, and the things are also very important and complicated or maybe sometimes technical. So in that case, the consultations may be appointed, maybe outsource those who have got a specific knowledge. Whereas the training firms are, and they're not only giving that specific knowledge, they may have diversified field of activities. They may have trainers in almost many areas, and also they may have the infrastructure facilities available with them. There may be professional seminars. Sometimes there are some seminars which are the professional seminars which are being uh, conducted somewhere, and a particular area of training activity. The people may be benefited by that kind of seminars. The organization may think of sending their people for attending that kind of professional seminars. So it can be outsourced that to the professional seminars. It may be college or the university courses. Yes, at times organization may think that some of the trainees, some of their employees may be sent to a particular for a particular program to a college or an university to attend certain courses which will benefit them to augment their knowledge in that particular area of activity. So ultimately, the suppliers and the vendors may be in these all these four kinds of areas. It may be training firm who are dealing with various kinds of activities related to the training program. There are consultants who are competent in a particular area of activity, area of knowledge. There may be professional seminars being conducted by, say, for example, and training being conducted by PhD Chamber of Commerce. And they advertise that that kind of seminar is being conducted. Those who are interested, they may pay for certain such fees for their employees. The All India Management Association, they are conducting some professional seminar. They may also advertise in the newspaper or in the digital media. So the organization can send their people by paying the necessary fees. They can attend those seminars, and then it becomes a specific knowledge from a specific organization through their seminars. Similarly, there may be the college and university courses sometimes, which is one has to see that how this is relevant to their employees, how this is going to benefit their employees by learning this. This may be sometimes a short period program, or maybe sometimes in a program for a longer period, depending upon the need of the organization and the necessary knowledge demanded in that particular role, right? And it may also be because the reason that such kind of specific knowledge may only be available uh, from that particular college or the university courses. So these are the suppliers, the vendors, which an organization has to think about and decide that which one they are going to really use with, right? Now, we'll look into that. What are the strategies for different firms? There may be a large organization, there may be a small organization, but different organizations may have their own need and their own strategy for using the outsourcing outside vendors. So, what are those strategies? Let us see the strategy for different firms that we'll see. I'll say, for example, first, if we want to see that what is the strategy for large organization. The training needs vary dramatically over short period. Yes, sometimes the training needs may vary in a large organization. In the sense, large organizations they have a number of people. There are a number of areas and subject areas, and which they have to train. And the number of trainees also being a large organization may be more. So sometimes, even in a very short period, there may be large requirement of training, which may not be possible for the particular organization to meet with in that short period. And so, to just meet with that certain requirement of number with the magnitude or the qualitative or quantitative requirement, they may go in for some outsourcing agencies to fill up the gap, right? Fill up the gap. What I mean by that, infrastructure they don't have, or the particular knowledge, the competence they don't have, the particular trainer they don't have, they have, but that is not sufficient to the need. A certain need may be very high, and to meet up with that gap, they may go in for outsourcing the agencies. A ready-made advantageous solution. This is another important area for the large organization, because a large organization has got varied requirements in different areas. And for any organization, it may not be sometimes possible to make get good knowledge, create good training infrastructure or developing training competence in all areas of activity. And even if it is possible, it may not be sometimes cost effective to develop people in all areas. So it may sometimes be advantageous to take up a particular topic, say ready-made solution is taken from outside, because another purpose reason may be that that kind of training program may not be a permanent thing. It may be required for a very short period of time. So if that certain requirement comes out, and for that a whole range of trainers are trained, it's not a sensible thing. So maybe for that particular thing, a ready-made solution are taken from outside agencies, and the requirement is fulfilled. To fill the gap of training resources. Yes, the large organizations, they may have the infrastructure, they may have the trainers required, the training infrastructure is available with them, but depending upon the need, sometimes there may be some gap or some resource shortage. So in that case, those can be, the large organization may partially go in for outsourcing those things from the outside agencies to meet needs of highly specialized. And there are some kind of specialized trainings which are possible to be given only by specialized organizations who are completely devoted to that kind of training programs or subject. In such a case, it's advantageous, it's better, it's sensible, it is cost effective to get those kinds of specialized trainings only through some outsourcing agencies rather than developing people from within domestically. So these are the things for which the large organization may require. They may have the strategy for the large organizations for going in for outsourcing. Now, coming to the small organizations, the first thing, the most important reason for a small organization to outsource people may be the budgetary reason. Because the small organization may not have, even if they want to, but they may not have the necessary budget available with them. And when there is a shortage of budget, uh, so it may not be sensible to develop a big infrastructure, to develop a large number of trainers in the organization. So it may be cheaper for them for one-time activity or two-time activity just to get some training program conducted with the help of some outsourcing agency. That may be cost effective for them. So one very important reason for the important strategy for small organization is from their budget. The lack of infrastructure. Yes, it's quite possible for a small organization, and every small organization doesn't have a big infrastructure in the sense they may not have the training centers, they may not have halls to conduct the training programs, or even sometimes they may not have a big training force in the organization. And in such a situation, it becomes necessary for them to take the help of some outsourcing agencies. A rare training activity. Yes, a small organization may not have some kind of training uh, a resource with them, or the trainers available with them for a rare activity, which sometimes done, and it is not sensible to develop people for that rare activity, the subject of rare activity. So, in those cases, it may be sensible only to get the help of outsourcing agency and conduct the training program as and when it's required. The flexible way of meeting changing and diverse training needs. Well, as you know that uh, organizations are conducting training programs as and when there is a necessity and there is a gap in the sense the necessary knowledge requirement, the cases requirement of the people in the organization is not matching with what is required, uh, what is required expected from them. And in such situations, people go in for training. But the another important thing is it that need is continuously changing. As the environment is changing, when the challenges are changing, the constraints are changing, the competition is changing. Every organization may face with requirement of new knowledge, new competence from for their employees. And so, whenever there is some new thing comes up, either you go in for developing or developing their own trainers within the organization, but that need may be short-lived. So it may not be necessary to, it may not be sensible to develop people for that, the trainers for that. So to meet that immediate requirement, one may go in for hiring the or outsourcing the outside agencies. So it becomes a very flexible way. As and when there is a requirement for a short-time requirement, they can go in for outsourcing. Of course, for the requirements which are of permanent nature, even a small organization may think about developing their own infrastructure in the sense of developing their own trainers. But for short period of time, and it may be sensible or maybe more flexible to hire the outsourcing agencies for conducting the training, conducting their managing the training process and managing their training programs. Well, now let us come into very another important aspect of this, that in organization whenever there is some training activity, and the HR department is the functioning in the organization may have different kinds of roles. Sometimes the activities are centralized in their central office, or maybe sometimes it is diversified or decentralized into different areas. So, in such a cases, how the things should be taken into, how the what steps are need to be taken, what are the guidelines that need to be followed. So there is centralized and decentralized HR structure, as you know. When we're talking about HR structure, it may be centralized, it may be decentralized. When there is a centralized activity, some of the things, sometimes it may be totally centralized, sometimes it may be decentralized, sometimes it may be mixture in the sense some of the things are centralized, some of the things are decentralized. That depends upon the organization, their own policy, their own strategy. Well, the centralized HR strategy generally, what are the involvement of them? The budgetary process. In many organizations, the budget is centralized within the centralized HR department. But the budget is such a thing which they may not like to decentralize with their branches or their different segments. So the budgetary process may be, in many cases, it is confined with the centralized HR staff. Monitoring of training policies. Yes, in many of the organizations, many of the big organizations, what they do is at the centralized HR level, they develop a training policy. Training policy as to what kind of training programs are to be conducted, how the training, whether the trainings are to be outsourced or not, what are the infrastructure will be developed in the organization, and what are the policies, who will be trained, who will be the target group, what are the expenditure, what are the places for where the training programs are to be conducted for different target groups. So those policies are developed in a centralized HR department, and then those are circulated to the different branches, and then those trainings are conducted by the different branches, different segments, and which are only monitored by the HR department from the head office. This is one. They have also got a role in providing consultation to their branches or to their segments. I mean, as regards whenever in a training situation there may be some problem, and that can be consulted with the central HR department, and the necessary solution may be found. So the HR department works as a consultative agency. You say, for example, there is a certain requirement of some training program, and if there is a certain requirement of training program, there may be need for sending some trainers from one place to the other place. Maybe the time between that, the requirement is very short, and the people may have to transport. They cannot transport uh, to the trains. I mean, it may take time, so they may have to go by air. Now you have to take a permission. If there is a budgetary constraint, you have to take permission from the HR department whether you can send the people by air or not. Now this is something. There's a training program which is of a very specific nature, of a highly technical nature, and it requires to be, outsourced from outside agencies, but the cost involved is high. Whether such kind of training is to be done or not, one can take the consultation from the centralized HR department, and with their permission, they can go in for this some kind of training program. The HR department will provide the support to the branches in the areas of training, in the areas of infrastructure, in the areas of policy matters. They will give the support. Compilation of list of approved vendors. Yes, this is a very important area. Whenever in any organization there is a scope for getting outsourcing agencies, outside agencies, or appointing the vendors from outside. So there will be some guidelines prepared by the centralized HR department, that who are the vendors whom you can hire. The people in the HR department, the central office, they may search, they may approve some of the vendors with their experience, with their report from the market, and then those lists are circulated to the branches. The branches will go as per the vendors list. So they will only approve, hire only those kinds of vendors who are in the approved list. So that compilation of list of approved vendors is done in the centralized HR department. Sometimes, and many times, the vendors' payments in an outside agency may be kept in the centralized HR department. It may be sometimes that payment is made by the branches, but the sanctioning is done by the HR department or the central office. So the payment of vendors may sometimes also be centralized. Mandated training programs. There are some training programs which the organization, as per their strategy, is every organization has got their own strategy, that what kind of training programs are required to be given to the people compulsorily. So those kinds of mandated training programs are listed, are developed, and those kinds of lists are given to the branches so that the branches can conduct the training programs on that. So mandated training programs are selected, decided, and finalized by the central HR department and circulated to their branches. Well, now let us see the decentralized activities. What are the decentralized activity? What I mean, as I told you earlier, it depends upon the organization that what will be centralized, what will be decentralized. But in general, these kinds of things are generally decentralized for to the business units, the divisions, or the geographical units, to the branches, to the segments of the organization. So decentralized activity may be select the appropriate vendors from approved list. As I told you earlier, that a centralized HR department may have an approved list of vendors, and the branches of the business units are permitted to select the appropriate vendors as per the guidelines for the training program. So that selection of appropriate vendors may be that may be a decentralized activity which can be done by the business units. They may select suitable training program from approved list. As I told you that there are some mandatory training programs and some programs which are approved, that these programs can be done in the organization, or these programs can be done with the help of some outside agencies. So out of those training programs, the business units or the division may select the training program which suits to their requirement of their to their employees, right? So selecting the suitable training from the approved list sent by the central office, right? That may lie with the business unit. Making suitable to their budget. Yes, of course. I mean, the training program that they're going to conduct. Of course, every business unit, as I told you earlier, sometimes that business units make their own budget for the year. Yes, this year this is the such and such training programs we are going to conduct as per the policy of the organization. And these are the likely expenditure involved, and the total expenditure in the year will be this much, right? So naturally, when the budget is fixed, whenever any training program is conducted, they may have to see that how to keep the expenditure within their budget. So making suitable changes to that the training programs depending upon the budget, to keep it within the budget. That suitability, that flexibility is kept with the business units. Conducting programs, yes, after all, doing everything. At the end of the day, the training program is conducted by the business units as per the policy guidelines, as per the things sanctioned to them, right? So everything, the program is conducted at the business units, right? And after conducting training programs, the responsibility doesn't end here. They need to send certain reports and feedback to the central HR unit. And most of the organizations, they require that whenever there is some training program, the people must send, the business units or the divisions must send their uh, reports on those programs and the feedback receipt from the trainees, just to make further developments, further changes or developments as per his requirement. So that sending the preparing the reports, I mean obtaining the reports, obtaining the feedback from the participants, preparing a report on that, and sending those reports and feedback to the central HR unit. That is also a decentralized activity. Well, after seeing this centralized and decentralized activity, uh, we need to see somewhat about what are the expectations from our HR units. What competence do you think that HR units need to have, should have, and the competence of the HR units? Let us see, competence of HR unit implementing their outsourcing agencies. Now, the outsourcing the HR units uh, to outsource the outsourcing agencies. The HR unit may have certain competence, may need to have some kind of competence, some kind of understanding, some kind of knowledge, so that the proper implement of outsourcing agency can be done. So, what are the things that's required? Number one, they must have thorough understanding of the training process. Of course, the HR unit must have a thorough understanding of the training process. That training process is the continuous thing, right from the training needs analysis to the evaluation stage. There are various stages: the training need analysis, the designing, the development and implementation of training program, and all that. The feedback and everything is there. And in this whole process, there are various functions to be conducted, right? Selecting the training program, selecting the materials, finalizing the venue, yes, and everything is there. So until unless you know that entire training process, you cannot know that where we there is a gap in the organization. To understand that gap, the HR department must have a thorough understanding of the entire training process, and they should be able to spot out and find out where lies the gap. And if there is a gap, then there possibly there may be need for getting some outsourcing agencies involved into it. So there is a need for thorough understanding of the training process, so that the outsourcing agencies may be hired for, uh, I mean, sensibly and effectively. The skills and evaluation selection of approved vendors and consultants. Yes. And now when we talk about the HR unit, we are talking about the HR unit of the business unit as well as of the centralized HR unit, as wherever it is. The, the very important aspect, one very important aspect in outsourcing the outside agencies is that the HR unit must have the necessary understanding, the knowledge, and knowledge to evaluate the prospective vendor or the consultant in relation to the particular kind of training program that they are going to conduct, so that the people may get the necessary knowledge to meet up the organizational requirement. So they must have the skill in evaluation and selection of approved vendors. Who are the approved vendors? Whether they have got that necessary competence to do that? What are the parameters on which that competence is to be decided, and then ultimately to select out of some of the few, I mean, shortlisted vendors. So that becomes a little complicated process and technical process, and that necessary skill should be there in the HR, the people in the HR unit. And general management cases, yes, HR unit is also involved in general management of the training process in the organization. Whether it is if in an HR unit, if it is in the head office, in the centralized office, they are looking after the entire training process in the whole organization. And if it is in the business unit is looking after the general management of the training process involved in that, but they're in their particular domain, their particular area of activity. So for that general management, they need to have their people need to have the necessary knowledge, skills, and attitudes which is required to conduct such kind of thing properly and effectively. That the training program can be managed, the training process can be managed effectively, uh, effectively in accordance with the requirement of the organization, in requirement of the organizational objectives and goals. Right. So an HR unit must have thorough understanding of the training process. The must should have the skill in evaluation and selection of approved vendors and consultants, which is important. And they need to have general management cases so that they can really do their activities well, effectively, uh, to meet up with the organizational requirements. Now, I think so far we have talked about certain things, and if I recapitulate the thing, we have talked about what are the outsourcing strategy for the organizations, when they should make an outsourcing, what are the, even when there is an outsourcing is there, what are the roles of the HRD units while doing that, who are the specific suppliers and vendors to whom we can really outsource from outside, what will be the different strategies for different kinds of firms, maybe large firm, large organization, or a small organization, how their strategies will differ in terms of selecting the vendors or out hiring the vendors from outside. And then we've seen that in HR unit, sometimes how the training programs are centralized, what activities are kept in the centralized HR unit, and what are decentralized to their business units and to the segment, to the branches, and all that. So, what are the centralized activity and what are the decentralized activity involved in it? And while doing this training, outsourcing agencies, our consultants. What are the competence required for the HR, the people who are involved in the activities of the HR units? So, what are the competence required? So, with that, we come to the first half of our training session is over now. I would like if anybody has got any question, any doubt, any question regarding this, you're most welcome to ask me. Yeah, please come out with your questions and so that I can reply to that.
Actually, sorry, we need to actually link both the gel management and cases.
Yeah.
uh,
See, KSA means what? KSA means here
Knowledge,
in that
skills, and attitude.
no, KSA is of the people who are working in the HR department.
Okay,
So
okay,
they, since they have to conduct the general management process,
right.
they need to have the necessary knowledge,
Hmm.
skills, and attitude towards that.
Okay.
Right? So
Hmm.
we're talking about the KSA of the people who are working in the HR unit.
Acha, acha, acha. Not the trainees, not the trainees.
Not we are not talking about the trainees now.
Hmm. Acha,
We're
acha.
talking about since the training program is to be conducted,
Huh.
the training is to be managed.
Huh.
The people in the HR department need to have that kind of cases.
Attitude, yeah, right, right.
Hi.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else has got any question? Please come out. Some question should be there, must be there. It helps you to understand and explain the things not only for you but for others also. So you can share this with others. Yeah, I talked about many things this time.
When we are talking of mandated training programs,
Yeah,
there are some programs which are need to be done at a. I mean, it is compulsory for
yeah,
the organization to undertake these trainings.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
compulsory. It is
It is
compulsory.
compulsory in the sense that compulsion may come from two different angles. Sometimes that the government has got some mandatory
Okay.
mandate
Hmm.
to the organization that
Hmm.
every organization must conduct such kind of training. Say,
Hmm.
for example, if I say for the public sector organizations, the government of India has got that people who are from the non-Hindi area, they must get training in Hindi.
Right, 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 right. Absolutely.
So
Okay.
they have to mandatorily they have to go in for conducting such
Hindi
training
training.
program.
Right.
This is one.
Hmm.
Another thing is the organization may think the people who are working in their organization must have at least some knowledge which is to have that at least minimum competence.
Right.
So they may prescribe some training program necessarily. Maybe they want that people must have a training on attitude. So it depends upon the organization what kind of. So it may be mandated by the organization itself, or maybe mandated by some outsourcing outside agencies. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, any one of you from you, I would like to ask, have ever, outsourced some outside agencies in your organization? Anybody out of you?
Yes, sir, multiple times.
Multiple times. So, can't you share some of your experiences?
So not being as a trainer, but yes, being part of administration.
Part of administration. Administration in the sense you are in what? And the HR or general administration?
So general administration,
General
regular
administration.
activities.
Mhm. There are general administration department who look into that. But generally, what happens? The general administration department, they don't have much. They don't. Sometimes they cannot appreciate the need for the training departments. As it happens. So,
No, sir. Actually, being part of general administration, we have actually realized in the in past 2 years that there is actually a need of a strict need of training departments,
well, that's
which
very good.
can
Uh-huh.
and we conveyed it to our top management also, and tried to make it happen in our organization so that the forthcoming issues and uh, highs can be met with
So, by the way,
and the
which
skills can be
organization you are
developed.
working?
So I'm working from an academic
Okay.
institution, but
Okay.
this pandemic has taught us a lot about that. IT trainings are required for our organization employees a lot. So
Okay. Okay.
that's the thing that which made me to come here on this platform.
Okay. 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 Right. 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 Mhm. So that is the thing that every department, the department, they have got their own role to play. And yes, of course, in a training system, departments must cooperate and collaborate with each other to really get something done. So that's your experience. So if you have got any other question, and if you don't have any other question, then I have to go further.
So
Mm,
but there is a basic thing that I wanted to ask that there
please.
is one thing, one side there is a thing called like we are going for being a trainer, we are like studying things for a trainer, like, and then this concept of like introducing or dealing with vendors and all that. So
Uh-huh.
basically, like am feeling that this role is either better suited with HRs or with the administration or with the trainers to in whose court this work goes to basically.
You see, when you talk of trainer is not responsible for such kind of thing. It is the training department which is responsible. That training department may be a different department from the HR unit, or it may be part of the HR unit. Otherwise also, training is obviously it is under the HR unit, but then sometimes they are may keep a separate departments. But even if it is a separate department or with an HR unit, it is the responsibility of the training department. A training department, not of any particular trainer. It may happen sometimes the senior trainer may be given the role of selecting the outside agencies and all that. That's a separate issue, right? But it is not as a trainer. It is as a general administration of the training department, right? So it is not the responsibility of a trainer, but it is the responsibility of the training department. Now, who gets that responsibility? He may be a trainer, he may not be a trainer. That depends upon. Are you getting my point? What I'm saying?
Yes, sir, completely.
Hmm. So it is not that, but yes, but I must tell you, a trainer must understand these concepts because a trainer, when he understands it, because a trainer may have to be associated with the outsourcing agencies, right? But at times, what happens? The outsourcing agencies comes, gives a training in the organization. Trainer becomes associated with it. Trainer himself gets trained in that particular area, and after that, the outsourcing agency goes, and the trainer starts giving training. So trainers need to be associated with that. Secondly, when a trainer becomes he himself becomes a consultant or he himself becomes a freelancer, then when he understands these outside agencies well, then he can understand that as an outside agency, what is his role to play. He can better visualize that. So once he is working within the organization, and the next time he's working as a freelance trainer, there is a lot of difference. So when he looks into the functions and activities of outside agencies, how they act, how they perform, so once he becomes a freelance trainer, he can better appreciate those things and really do things better. Are you getting my point? What I'm saying?
Yes, so basically HR has to introduce it to the organization, but ultimately trainer has to work with them
Of course, the
and get
trainer
the things
because
done.
trainer is the person who understands it, realizes this, right? So whether it's even in a training department, the most of the activities are done by the trainers only. They are given the task because they understand the whole process, right? But not as a trainer, but maybe in administration as a in the training department, right? That is the thing. So it may be depending upon that what is the organization, how the tasks are divided, and what roles are given to different people. Well, may I go ahead then? Yeah. So now we'll go to the next section of it, that the selection of vendors. Well, so far we have talked about vendors are important, when vendors are required, who does it, and all that. Now, and the important thing is that how to select the vendors. What are the areas? What are the things that one need to see? The aspects to be considered while selecting vendors. Well, number one, careful screening of the potential provider. That's required. You have to carefully screen. And as I told you, I give you the background that this screening of the vendors may be done at the centralized HR level, right? And they prepare the vendors, the list of the vendors, and they supply to the business units. Or it may be totally decentralized. Every business units, they screen the potential provider, they prepare the list, and they use accordingly. So it will depend upon. But wherever it may be, whether it is the centralized justice department or in the business units, there must be careful screening of the potential provider. That is a must. That's to be done. And while doing that, there are certain things which one has to look for. One has to take care of. Number one, the cost of hiring. That's a very, very important area. Of course, important area. Vis-a-vis the knowledge and competence of the potential provider. What is the cost? But if it doesn't come within their budget, they may have to think, and may have to balance between the two, which one is more important, right? So the cost of hiring is some issue, is an issue which they need to, one has to see very carefully, and one has to, take care of now while selecting the vendors. Low cost providers vis-a-vis competence. So here comes the most important point, is that it's not merely the cost which is important, but cost vis-a-vis the competence of the trainer, of the vendor, the requirement of the organization also. Well, I think three things are required to be seen here: the cost involved, the competence of the provider, and the need for the organization. Out of these three, you have to make a mix and match and balance the thing, that whether low cost provider is desirable to be hired or not. Because by hiring low cost provider, are we going to get the necessary competence which is required from and the provider, and that's going to really give us the necessary uh, fulfill the necessary need for our employee. Fourth thing is expensive provider versus experience and competence. If you can see the low cost provider and their competence, then you need to also see that if you're going to spend more and the provider is expensive, then do they have really that kind of experience and competence which really justifies making the payment? If our needs are there and we can afford to pay, then we need to see that how much expensive is this, whether that balances out the experience and the competence of the of the trainer, right, of the provider. That's need to be seen. And the next point is to be seen that ability to provide desired cases to employees. You know, these are two different things. One is experience, another is competence. And of course, this competence, one thing is added with it, the ability to really transfer the training to the people, to transfer the necessary knowledge, skills, and attitude to the employees. The organization is not only interested in the experience of the provider and the past competence of the provider. Organization is more interested in their ability to transfer the training to their employees, so that when the expenditure being made while selecting the outside vendor gets justified, right? So that is the important thing one need to say, that there should be a careful screening of the potential provider. The cost of hiring is to be seen. Low cost provider versus the competence of the provider has to be made balanced out. The expensive provider versus the experience and competence of the provider has to be balanced out. And one has to see the ability to provide desired KSA to their employees. These are the things which must be considered while selecting a vendor. Now, while selecting the vendor, there are certain pertinent questions regarding the training provider capability. Now, I told you earlier in the earlier slide that we need to see the provider's experience and competence and their ability. So, while seeing that, what are the elements? What are the parameters which we can really depend upon to to ensure that the training provider has that kind of the possibilities having that kind of capabilities? So number one is the trainer's background. What kind of education, what kind of experience the trainer has got, that shows something, that makes us understand something about his capability. The trainer's background is important thing, his education and experience. But it may not be everything, but yes, but that's very important, very, very important. Even I would say that more than the education itself, the experience is very, very important. Next, has the trainer provided this particular training program services before? Well, that the the people who are involved in selecting the vendors, whether in the central office or in the business unit, they need to see this aspect, scrutinize this aspect. If this particular provider, whether they have already given this kind of training earlier, maybe with any other agencies or not. Well, if that has been done, then have the trainer been evaluated? If there is an evaluation of those trainers, wherever they have administered given that kind of training, has been evaluated, and if then, what is the evaluation report from them? If so, what is the outcome? To need to see that his the trainer's previous delivery, previous services given, and its evaluation. That's important. But the question is that if some trainer has already given some training program somewhere and has been evaluated, how to know that? From where we should get those sources, from where we can find out. The reference of people who can acknowledge, who can knowledgeably speak about trainers, product, and service. And this is what is generally done when outsourcing the outside agencies or the consultants. The organization may ask for some of the references from the consultant itself, from the outside agency itself, that where they have already given such kind of training. And we may ask them, they may ask them to provide their uh, mobile number or their email addresses, so that one can go and reach those people and find out, make an inquiry about the previous services of that particular trainer and the evaluation. So reference of people who has got the knowledge have to talk about the trainer's capability, about their product, about their services, right? That is required to be seen. Next, can the trainer give names and permission to contact, right? To contact, number one, the references, to contact the trainees who receive training under him. Sometimes even the consultant may himself say that we have given training to such and such people, you can go and inquire from them. So, taking the names and the permission to contact the trainees, the person who was the trainer's primary contact in the client's organization. And as you know, whenever some outside agency gets involved or consultant gets involved in any organization, there may be some a particular person, maybe in the training department or in the HR department, with whom he may have got the contract, through which, through whom he is introduced to the organization or is connected to the organization. So we may search for such people who has got knowledge and contact of that client, so that we can get the understanding or the our required information from that particular person from that organization. Person who monitor or coordinate the training. Sometimes it happens there is a contact person through whom that trainer is introduced to the organization, but then later on the training program is monitored by somebody else, or by the coordinator or a particular trainer who has given the job of the coordination, right? So that person, the coordinator, always remains with the consultant, because the consultant gives the training. It's required, it's desired that the coordinator or the particular trainer who is attached to him should always be in his with him in the entire training process, and they becomes a very good source of knowledge about the competence and capability of the outside agency. So this is a very, very important thing. Those people who are going to really assess the training provider, this is a very important thing. So I'll just recapitulate this. Trainer's background is important. Has the trainer provided particular training services before his earlier experiences, wherever he has given that kind of service earlier? And if so, then whether it has been evaluated, and if the evaluation is done, what kind of evaluation has been done? The reference of people who can speak about the trainers products and services, who have got first hand knowledge about the trainers products and services, uh, to get the names and names of the people of the trainees whom we have given the training, the person with the primary contact in the organization where the provider has initially given his training, conducted his training program, the person who monitor or coordinate the training program, uh, and being remained with the consultant all the time. These are some first-hand information which can really help for a person in the HR department to decide about the provider capability. And there are some other pertinent questions here. Number one, if there is a trainer, how the trainer develop the program. I mean, what is his way of developing the program? So, that's very important, because we have got some desire. You as an organization, we have got some desire, some expected outcome. Whether the trainer also thinks that way, where there is a similarity in our thinking and things are going happening the same way, how he delivers the training program, because on this delivery, it will depend on this delivery of training, and the transfer of training will depend. The people in the organization may should be able to follow that what is being delivered, so that how the training is being delivered, how they are providing the training service. I wonder what is the way of providing the training service. In what way is giving the training? The process is telling, the methods is using, the infrastructure is using, the equipment is using, right? His way of delivering the trainer is important. That tells us about the trainer, a lot of things about the trainer, and we can make an understanding about the efficacy, the possible efficacy of the training program. Can the trainer provide outline of his approach or process, whether it's suitable to culture and budget? You may, as a in the training department or while selecting the provider, can ask the trainer to provide an outline of his approach, how he is going about the training program. What is his approach? What is the process? What is the schedule? And what things he's going to use? What kind of equipment he's going to use? And everything regarding that has to be seen. And if after that one see that whether it suits to his culture, to the culture of the organization, I mean, uh, looking into the fact the, the the culture of the people who are going to be trained in that, and what are their expectations from the training program, and what you are expecting them uh, to be and to get from that particular training program, and what is the budget available with you. Now, whether the things which are required, the necessary equipment that's required, or the training process is going to involve some kind of extra budget or no, and that can be seen. And that's also a very important aspect to see whether that particular trainer, the training provider, is going to be suitable for the organization or not. And the sample of materials, handouts, exercises, and videos. Yes, if you can ask for those things from the trainer, from the prospective trainer, we can ask for the material that is going to use, the handouts is going to use, the exercise is going to use, the videos is going to present to the people, and that will show us that what kind of material is using, what is the depth of material, what is the suitability of the content of the training, and what is providing to the to the trainees, whether it suits to us, whether it is suitable to the standard which is expected from it. If not specific to the organization, how to make it appropriate to the organization. It sometimes it's what happens, the consultant is talks about generic things, it talks about a generic things about a particular subject, but every organization has got their unique way and their unique culture and unique process. So whether that suits to the organization or not, if it doesn't suit or it doesn't completely suit to the requirement, there may be some necessary changes made to make it tailor-made to the requirement of the organization, right? And so that making that appropriation, one can discuss, the HR department or the training department concerned or the trainer concerned can discuss mm, with the prospective trainer and how this can be made appropriate to the organizational needs, so by making the necessary changes and the suitable changes in the particular training program, the materials and the handouts and everything in the process, right? So once this is done, then the next important question comes that what is the training provider, once you select a training provider, it's not the end of the story. When you have selected a training provider, that training provider will come and deliver the training to the organization. But till the time the training is completed, it has to be, have to be managed, they have to be coordinated with it. So what are the things that need to be seen while managing the training providers? Well, it starts with the beginning. A training provider will go as per your directions. So a training provider may require certain informations which are very, very crucial to him for delivering the required training program. So there must have a clear direction given to the training provider. That clear direction is to be given by the HR department concerned, or the training department, or the coordinator, or the trainer who has been assigned to that role. So clear direction is to be given. Then next, the goals and expectations specifically spelled out. The prospective trainer has to be clearly told out, spelled out, what are the goals and expectations of your organization from him, what you're going to expect from the training program being delivered to be delivered by the trainer, that so that the trainer can prepare accordingly according to your goals and expectations. He can prepare the material, he can plan his delivery, he can use the various training methods which is required for them, because it will depend upon your requirement, it will depend upon the particular training target group, and the specific knowledge, skill, and capability, the attitude of the particular training group, which you know very well. So those are to be spelled out clearly. Those expectations and those specifications of the trainees are to be given to the training providers so that they can make the necessary changes, they can make the necessary ways and means by which you can go to deliver the training programs. Logical flow with minimum disruption. Yes, the training provider must have a must develop a logical flow with minimum disruption, in the sense that the training, whatever is going to be delivered, must have a logical flow, and for that, there may be requirement of helping him to understand the requirement of the organization, which will have minimum disruption in the process of the training activity. So maintaining that logical flow, one has to coordinate with the training provider. And that's important issue, and they must understand that what kind of thing is required to be delivered to the people in the organization. Monitoring plans and goals of providers. So the provider must have some plan and goal which has been shared with you, and how he is going to deliver the program, what his expectation and what is expecting from the training program at different stages. And so the organization, I mean the HR department or the representative of the HR department, the coordinator or the trainer who is assigned to that role, They need to be with him all the time to monitor his plans and goals, uh, which has been supplied to you. Whether this is going in the right direction, if something goes wrong, he can give his suggestions, he can discuss with him, so that ultimately the training program can be conducted to the requirement of the organization as has been expected from him. There should have open communication between training function and the provider. Well, that's very well important thing. The provider doesn't know about the organization. Provider doesn't know about the trainees. Provider doesn't know about the level of the trainees. Provider doesn't know about the your expectations from the program. So the training department, the trainer function, whether it's an HR or it's an independent training department, they have to have open communication with the provider. So from time to time on different aspects, so that the training which is we're expecting to happen can be done properly and we can meet up with the required necessary uh, expectation of the organization. So there must be a very clear and open communication, and that's very important. And this communication is has to be continuously going on, because depending on the different stages and times that needs may change. So that has to be continuously monitored with, and that is the way we can really manage the training provider. So it comes in 5 points which are very important. Number one, they should have very clear direction given to the providers. Provider doesn't know about the training program, you have to give a very clear direction what is expected out from them. What are the goals and expectations that has to be specifically spelled out to them, so the training provider can feel it, can understand it, and he can make his training program accordingly, and he can deliver his training program accordingly. There should have absolutely logical flow with minimum disruption in the training program. We need to monitor the plans and goals of the providers. uh, Plans and goals of the provider is given to you, and you to see that whether things are going on the right direction or not. If not, that can be sorted out with him, or can be discussed, and things can be changed, and things can be improved upon. There should have total open communication between the training function and uh, the provider, and that's important. That's required to be seen. Well, now we'll see that when you talk of the outsourcing strategy, that the cost is involved. So, what are the issues with the cost, outsourcing strategy and cost? Another question here is that when we do outsourcing, whether it is going to reduce our cost or increase our cost, and it will depend upon the organization, depend upon the requirement, right? Depend on the frequency of the program, depend upon the cost involved in it. So everything is a very important thing here. So the first point that you should look into it is a substantial saving in terms of HR, staff salaries, benefits, and taxes. Now the question is that there is one requirement of a particular training program only once in a while, and for that one particular training program, you develop a trainer sending to some for some training, specialized training, give a how his cost involved in it. That may not be a sensible thing. It's better that for that kind of specialized and uh, specific training programs which are rarely done, it's better to have an outsourcing agency that is going to reduce our cost. Well, you need not to give any HRD staff salaries or benefits and taxes and all that, making getting an employee. So sometimes it's this way. The outsourcing strategy may be cheaper than uh, doing it in-house. Second, as per out in outsourcing agency, vendor is paid only for the contracted period. For the payment of the vendor is for a specific period. It may be for 2 days or 3 days or 7 days or a month, depending upon the training program. So this is not a whole year episode. So the cost involved is maybe less. So it's better to pay the vendor for 7 days or 10 days or 15 days, and then there is no other cost involved. So the cost may be reduced by outsourcing agency. If, on the contrary, we appoint our own people, develop our own people who will be sitting in the organization throughout the year, where the requirement is only for a particular period of time, so it not be sensible. No layoffs or staff relocation when training ceased. Well, it is the training is done, the contract is made for a specific period during the training program. So when the training program is over, uh, there is no liability, on the organization. Outsourcing agency is relieved of it, and there's no other costs involved later on. So that's going to, and the cost is involved only for a particular period of time. Vendors program development costs paid among client. Well, this is one aspect. I mean, for this, I would say that necessary bargaining is required to be done, because what you're expecting is that if a vendor is highly experienced and if you have a lot of demand in the market, there are two things involved in it. Number one, the vendor may charge a high cost. At the same time, since the vendor has got a high demand, so his cost, his development cost for the program is spread among various clients. So we know that he has got a large margin, good margin involved in it. So we can make a bargaining with him, because understanding the fact that he may go in for a lower cost also, because his development cost is very low, since he has got large number of clients available with him. So at that way, sometimes the cost may be reduced if you keep in view this aspect. Train the trainer program reduces the cost. This is another area which you need to think of. As I told you earlier, that when we make that, take an outside vendor and use an outside vendor, then there are two ways of doing it. One way is that we call that vendor and we continuously give training to our employees on that particular subject, which is very specific subject or technical subject. So there is a high cost involved in it. The other way, alternative way, is that once you hire the training agency and the training provider, then we train some of our trainers, one trainer or more than one trainers in that particular group. The trainer gets trained because he has got the basic elements of being a trainer. And when he understands the subject very well, he becomes competent enough to give the training. And if he becomes competent enough to give the training program, then later on there is no need for appointing such vendors. And that's going to reduce our cost. So it's only once or twice a training is given to the trainer, one person, and then the services of the outside vendors are not required, and the trainer starts giving, an in-house person, he starts giving the training and to the employees, and that is really going to reduce our cost of train the trainer program. Really going to reduce our cost, because we have really trained the trainer in that particular process. So it reduces substantial, it makes a substantial savings in terms of HRD supplies, HRD staff salaries, benefits, and taxes. I mean, the outsourcing agent strategy, it reduces cost. It is vendor, because the vendor is paid only for the contract period. There's no layoff or staff relocation when training is ceased. It's only for once. The vendors program is distributed among various clients, so his cost of development is less, so we can bargaining with them, we can make bargaining with them to reduce this cost, right? And by making training the trainer in a particular program, we can reduce the cost and reduce the need for the outside vendors, so that may also reduce our cost. But what happens in the real life, that there is some mixed strategy always. Some of the training programs are being conducted in-house, and some of the training programs are being conducted through the outside agencies. There should be a mix and match, mixing of the things depending upon the requirement. We have to make a wise choice, that which really is going to reduce our overall cost of the organization. So the mixed strategy is like this: combination of providing training internal and contracting with the training providers. Yes, there may be a combination. We may provide the training internally, and maybe some of the trainings will be conduct with the outside contractors. So there may be a combination, and that combination becomes sensible. Combination of centralized and decentralized approach. And as I told you earlier, in every organization, it may not be completely centralized, or it may not be completely decentralized. There is centralized and decentralized approach, a mix of these two, combination of these two, depending upon the policy and the strategy of the organization and the expected goal of the organization. So it may have a combination of both the things. The new training outsourced, it's possible that the old training processes are developed within the organization, and whenever there is a new training, it is outsourced. People are trained in that particular process, and then that outsourcing is stopped, and the people only in-house people start giving training. It may be the maybe a strategy. The training developed or provided a customized organizational requirement that's required, because whatever we get from the outside agents, it may not always suit to the organizational needs, because there need to be make little changes, tweaking in that entire process, so that it becomes more relevant to the organization. So that strategy is that get a training outside agency and customize that their training whatever thing materials and the process suiting to the needs of the organization, make that little changes and use it in the organization. That may be a strategy. The cost of hiring contracted consultants offset the cost of staffing need. Yes, of course. As I told you that there may be mixed strategies. Some of the training programs are contracted from outside, and some of the things are done from inside. And when we contract and get a consultant from outside, definitely it is going to reduce the cost of our staffing need, the staffing need of the organization, right? So we have to see that which one is better, whether that particular knowledge is available in the organization. If not, then we may have to need for going for the consultant, and but that is definitely going to help us in terms of reducing the staffing, the cost of the towards the staffing need. Well, when this mixed strategy is discussed, and then there is a last thing which I would like to discuss is that we may select a vendor through the entire process that we have seen. But once we select the vendor, the responsibility of the HR department doesn't cease there. There are certain things that they have to uh, oversee while the entire process, training process continues on. So the role of HR does not end with vendor selection. There are certain requirements which need to be highlighted here. Somebody from the organization has to closely work with the vendor. As I told you that some person from the HR department, some person from the training department, some the coordinator of the program, or a training trainer who has been assigned that role has to closely work with the vendor all the time and making communication, overseeing the things, taking the feedback and everything, right? Understanding of organizational culture and how things work are to be shared. As I told you that a consultant outside vendor is an outside person. It doesn't have the knowledge of the organization culture, the specific things of the organization, the expectation of the trainees, the level of the trainees and everything. So at every point of time, there need to be a sharing of the information with the vendor and the people from the HR department, or the trainer, or the, as I told you, the coordinator. They may have to, coordinate with the vendor, share with the vendor all this information. Requirement of providing direction and insight to provider as to how is the program can be made suitable to the organization. And that's a very important issue. It's not merely providing a training program from a very highly reputed uh, training consultant. And it may, unfortunately, sometimes it happens that an organization may go in for selecting a very highly experienced and highly, uh, I mean, eminent consultant. But unfortunately, whatever he delivers doesn't meet the requirement, doesn't become suitable to the organizational requirement, doesn't come to the level of the people who are being trained. So there is a need for coordinating and collaborating with the provider, training provider, so that whatever is going to deliver suits to the needs of the organization. I mean, that insight is to be provided with the to the vendor, so that he can develop the program accordingly, according to the expectation of the organization. Connecting with the trainees and customizing training accordingly. Yes. You have to connect to the trainee. The trainee's requirement, their level, their expectation, their learning process, and their learning characteristics and everything. What is the expectation they're having? So you need to customize the training accordingly, right? So HR department has to continuously oversee this thing, that so that the training program becomes really effective, and it really suits the uh, serve the purpose of need of the organization. It helping in conducting performance reviews. Yes, HR department has to conduct the performance reviews, because what performance is being done in the training process by the vendor has to be reviewed by the HR department, right? Because it's not a, may not be a one-time affair. That hiring of the vendor, it may be the same vendor may be required to be called for in the next time also, right? So for that, that review is to be done. So that once if the review is made, he may be included in the list of the approved vendors, and he may be suitable for the organization. And so that review is to be made, a performance review is to be made with the HR department. Assuring the role play or case study is relevant to the organization. This is something also very important, I would say. Now, there are various kinds of training methods, as you know, that a trainer we use some of the methods like role play or the case studies or some games and simulations and all that. But it sometimes unfortunately happens that the particular training method or the things which are being used may not be totally effective to the situation, effective to the need. I mean, every, I mean, this what kind of experiential thing has to be related with the with the particular theoretical input that is being given, or that is, I mean, how this is going to really impact the people in that particular scenario or that situation, that has to be assured. If it doesn't do that, merely role playing or merely case study or merely a game is not going to really help it. So there may be a proper combination of these things, and it should be so that it becomes relevant to the organizational needs. It should really serve the purpose of that particular training program, right? So if a HR department has to look into all these six, from that they have to closely work with the vendor, they have to share with the vendor about the organization culture and how the things are working in the organization. They have to show them the direction, the insight about the organization to the provider. They have to connect to the training and customize the training accordingly, which is being given by the vendor. They have to help make the performance reviews of the vendor. They have to assess that the method, the role plays, the case studies that's being given by the vendor is really suitable to the organization, relevant to the organization or not. These are some of the roles with which the HR department has to play. So it doesn't end with a selection of a vendor, and HR has to continuously work with that. So with that, we are coming to the end of our training session, and if anybody has got any question, you're most welcome to. We have talked about, and after this first half, we have talked about the selection of vendors. We have talked about the pertinent questions that need to be addressed while selecting the vendor. We have seen what are the ways and means by which you can manage the training providers. Uh, we have seen what are the outsourcing strategy and cost involved and how to go about it. We have seen what are the mixed strategies that is to be used for uh, used in a training system of the organization, and what are the roles of HRD even after selecting the vendors. So now, if you have got any question, you're most welcome to ask me. Yes, please come out. Hello. There is
Sir,
not. Yeah. Hello. Nobody is responding to me. Yes.
No, it was very, very clear, I think.
It's very, very clear.
Yeah, right. Thank you. It's quite clear, because you have explained it in a very comprehensive manner.
It's nice, but I always expect that you put me some questions so that yeah, there may be some clarifications if it is required, of course. Mhm. That's nice if you have understood everything, but yes, as I tell you always, that don't stop here. Think about it, stimulate, make a brainstorming, and if you find out any question in your mind, please jot down and ask me in the next day.
When we talk about performance review, both the HRD department and also the vendors together, they'll be doing that.
Nee, the performance of the vendor has to be reviewed by the HR department.
अच्छा
HR department, the training department, people who are the in charge of that, looking into the affairs of the consultant, right?
अच्छा अच्छा the
But
vendors have
who does
nothing to
it?
do. the
Yeah, yeah,
ven-
please. Hello.
the vendors have nothing to do.
Of course, the vendor is not going to review his own evaluation.
अच्छा
Yes, we can also ask him that what is his point of view,
okay
how the program has gone. Yes, we
okay
can take a view of that also,
okay
whether
and
he is satisfied or not.
hmm.
Once he is satisfied, then we can make our own assessment. Yes,
Okay,
whatever he's saying is absolutely right or not.
yeah,
Yes,
right. Thank
absolutely.
you, thank you,
Mhm.
thank you so much.
Thank you. So, no question. If any question, please jot down. I will again ask you in the next day, and you can ask me always as usual. Right? So, I think I'm compelled to stop here. Uh, all the best. Take care. Goodbye. Hello. Hello. Wanted to ask me something?